Ralph, do you want to start?
I'm Ralph. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Ralph.
Hi, Ralph.
Go ahead, Adam.
Adam, alcoholic. Welcome to anybody that's new. If you're trying or getting on this workshop now, we've covered the doctor's opinion, which in many ways focuses on the phenomenon of craving, the allergy, Bill's story, and we are in the middle now of there is a solution. The whole purpose of this, as my sponsor had said to me, was I remember him saying to me, the work in AA really isn't working on myself. It was about getting rid of myself so I could be of help to others. And he really helped me to use the big book as a tool to help other alcoholics to a solution. And we are in this chapter, there is a solution. We went through Bill's story. If you're just catching up, most of the statements in the doctor's opinion in Bill's story can be turned into questions and directed to the person you're working with. So again, do I see the phenomenon of craving? Do I see the cycle of alcoholism, drink, craving, spree, emerging remorseful, swearing off forever, repeating the cycle? Do I see the restlessness, the irritability, the discontentment in my nature? Do I see that seems to be, for some of us, a natural state? And am I able to see in Bill's story his fight against God, Bill's omnipotence, his grandiosity, his sensitivity. Really looking at Bill's story from these questions again. Did I drink like him? Did I feel like him? Did I think like him? Was I as hopeless? And that's the first place that we start in working in this chapter right here. There's a solution. I start to look at, was I as hopeless as Bill? And there's a warning that is right in the beginning. And it says that the fellowship is but one element in the powerful cement that binds us. And the warning is, it says that would have never held us together as we are now joined. That first warning becomes critical. So I'm just going to go through really quickly some of the questions that come up in the first half of There Is a Solution. And that was the first one. Was I as hopeless as Bill? The next question was, do I have a way out on my own without help? That might be a question I would ask a new person when I'm going through this chapter. Have I come to believe that I suffer from an illness in all three areas? Physical, meaning the phenomenon of craving, mental, meaning the obsession, and the third area, spiritually, meaning I have this almost spiritual maladjustment to life. And that's something we're going to start to address as we go further in the book. I'm able to see the illness in all those areas. And did it involve me in a way that no human sickness could? Am I looking at these things? Am I an ex-problem drinker? Have I found this solution? And the guide to sponsorship, am I properly armed with facts about myself? The facts that I see the craving, the obsession, the spiritual malady. And there's a whole thing here on sponsorship that really gives some ideas of working with others. And then the next part of that is going through, do I have a choice? Is my willpower weak? Could I stop if I wanted to? Could I stop for her? All those questions going through this part of There Is a Solution. Could I give up liquor entirely if I was given a good reason? That's a very powerful question to work with new people. You know what I mean? Can I take it or leave it alone? All of those become very critical. At some stage of my drinking, did I lose control over the amount I take? And then coming to that last question up to where we are now, the question becomes, why can't I stay stopped? Because these, if you're working with a new person, the two fundamental questions are, can I stop once I start, which is the craving? And the second, can I stay stopped on my own without spiritual help? So going through the book, prayers, promises, warnings, and directions, up to where we are with Ralph and myself now, there's two powerful warnings on this page 24 where we're going to start. The first one is this. At a certain point in the drinking of every alcoholic, he passes through the state where the most powerful desire to stop drinking is of absolutely no avail. And if that's true, if that's a true statement, how can I not drink no matter what? When someone says don't drink no matter what and go to meetings, if I'm an alcoholic as described in the previous chapters, and I cannot bring into my consciousness, like it says, with sufficient force, the pain and suffering of a week or a month ago, how do I have a choice? Where my choice lies as an alcoholic is work the steps no matter what, maintain commitments no matter what, be of service no matter what, and develop the discipline in 10, 11, and 12. And by doing those things no matter what, I develop the grace not to pick up that first drink. Suddenly, there is a deep and effective spiritual experience that stands between me and that drink. So this is where we're at. And then the second warning up until where we're going to start is we are unable at certain times. Am I unable at certain times to bring into my consciousness with sufficient force the memory and suffering and humiliation of a week or a month ago? Am I without defense against the first drink? Remember this, if you're new, a lot of people know they're without defense against the second drink. They understand that. Once they take a drink, the drink takes a drink and the drink takes them. But what does it really mean to have no defense against the first drink? And then the next question is it possible that I can develop a spiritual defense? That if I work these steps and I get to this place, and I'll finish with this, that like it says, nothing ensures immunity from drinking more than intensive work with others. Does that imply that if I intensely work with others, I can develop some kind of immunity? And the next one is that I get a daily reprieve, meaning a stay of execution, contingent or dependent on the maintenance of my spiritual condition, which means if I can learn to maintain my spiritual condition and grow in 10, 11, and 12, can I get a daily reprieve from that? These are very important questions because I'm trying to inspire somebody at this point to move on. If you really look at there as a solution, it's pretty much like Bill's story. The first half of Bill's story, problem, second half, solution. If you look at this chapter 2, if you notice there is a solution, up until where we are right now, we've talked about the mental obsession, the mind that continues to take me back to that first drink. Now we're going to start to talk about the solution. Ralph, do you want to go ahead?
Ralph, alcoholic. The almost certain consequences that follow taking even a glass of beer do not crowd into the mind to deter us. If these thoughts occur, they are hastily and readily supplanted with the old threadbare idea that this time we shall handle it ourselves like other people. There is a complete failure, the kind of defense that keeps one from putting his hand on a hot stove. And that's an analogy that they use later on in the book on the bottom of 83. You don't have to go there, but on the bottom of 83, it says, we cease fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol, for by this time sanity will have returned. We will seldomly interested in liquor. If tempted, we recoil from a hot flame. So that's just 60 pages later and a lot of action. It's totally different reaction. The alcoholic may say to himself, most casual way, it won't burn me this time. So here's how. Or perhaps he doesn't think at all. Or how often have we begun to drink in some nonchalant way, and after the third or fourth, pounded on the bar and said to ourselves, for God's sake, how did I get started again? Only to have that thought supplanted by, well, I'll stop at the sixth drink, or what's the use anyhow? It's two voices or more voices going on in our heads. And, before the meeting, I'm not sure if it was even on this meeting or another meeting today, people are talking about, that it takes time to go through this book and stuff. And, we turned to, I believe that the questions are in these books for us to answer, but the answers are in ourselves and our own experience and are in our experience with another alcoholic. And, you want to use the word question. Sometimes you think of school and a mind, but maybe the better word to use is a word that I know Adam and I are very familiar with, is consideration. And consideration means different. It means a long process involving careful consideration. So, if the considerations come from your heart by your own experience. Did these things happen? I'm not going to go over all these questions, but there's so many of them in this past paragraph that we just read. And then it says, when this sort of thinking, is established in an individual with alcoholic tendencies, what type of thinking? The thinking that he can control his drinking, the thinking that he has a choice of whether he drinks or not. He's talking about choice here, the thinking that he has power over choice. He has probably placed himself beyond human aid, and unless locked up, he may die or permanently go insane. And the big consideration there is, have I placed myself beyond human aid? Have I tried to stop by every other means, probation, girlfriend, wife, willpower, court system, everything in the world, and do I always end up picking back up? And Bill uses certain words that are drunk traps. At the top of this page, it says the fact is that most alcoholics, that's a drunk trap. But at the top of the page, it says at a certain point in the drinking in every alcoholic. So you have to be careful on the words, because some are what we call drunk traps. They think, well, not everyone. And, I know what my experience is that every time I drank, the phenomena of craving didn't kick in. There were certain times where I was able to control it, or I just didn't drink enough, or I don't know what happened. Maybe I had that certain important thing that I had to do where I was able to do that. And those experiences just pushed me further in, because it convinced me I was under the delusion to defend my right to drink. But sometimes I would be 30, 60. I'm 6 months in a program, a couple months in jail, and 4 or 5 months in AA, and I'm worse. I'm further away from a drink than I've ever been in my life, and I'm miserable. Why? If drinking is my problem, why does this happen? And that's what Adam touched on at the beginning. It's that internal unmanageability, that restless, irritable discontent that tells my mind, okay, take the first drink, which then sets off the craving. Go ahead, Adam.
One of the things my sponsor used to say is, we all hear about insanity in AA, doing the same thing and expecting different results. And, we agree with that. But the other kind of insanity for us is doing the same thing, knowing exactly what's going to happen and doing it anyway. Right? At least the other kind of insanity, doing the same thing and expecting different results, at least there's some hope there. But see, this insanity that we're talking about, this crux of the problem that precedes the first drink for an alcoholic, will rear its head in many different ways. It may do it through my inability to see the truth, the way that I justify the drink, through resentment, through anger, right? I can justify it. I will drink at somebody. There's another kind of way that I'll drink, and that is that I may have that peculiar blind spot, that blank spot that puts me in a place where I'm completely vulnerable. Like all of my life, I saw that I was one decision away from a drink. And again, today, if you're new, between me and that decision, there's an entire world called recovery. For some people, it's the rooms. For some people, it may be a set of spiritual principles. For some of us, it's the culmination of the fellowship, service, and the steps that bring me to a place where suddenly I have a deep and effective spiritual experience that empowers me. Suddenly there's something between me and that drink. And what I know, if you're brand new and you can't stop yourself from taking a drink, don't beat yourself up. That's the way a lot of us work. But unless I've done the rest of the specific instructions in the book up to where Ralph was talking about, which is the 10th and 11th step, where those lofty 10th step promises come in, not the 9th step promises, where by now it says sanity will have returned, right? And he had said it. We recoil as if from a hot flame. The problem does not exist for us. It has been removed. That requirement is that there's certain requirements that are going to come in, and they're going to be in the next paragraph, the next couple paragraphs, that if I do not meet those requirements and take those actions, I will continue to stay in a place where I have no defense against that first drink. It's really important. So all of you, people ask me again, why do I keep going to meetings? I'm like, why do you keep going to the gas station? Because the shower I took yesterday won't keep me clean today. I cannot stay sober on yesterday's program. This is a lifelong kind of maintenance and development of a spiritual condition, which not only is joyful, but it gives me almost like a spiritual defense. And I the only reason I'm saying this right now, if you're new, is because we got to give the new guy hope here. That there's a lot of people on this forum tonight that have long-term recovery, that have relationships that work, that seem to have a spiritual defense. And most of us have taken the same specific action. So that's what this next piece, the solution, is going to be about. And it's very critical that I see that. I don't need a reason. That thing about, I know Sandy used to talk about halt, hungry, angry, lonely, and tired, and those are, the prelude to drinking, but it's not true. I could have had a great meal. I could be surrounded with people I love. I slept like a baby last night. There's not a cloud on the horizon, and I still want to drink.
Yep.
So when we continue,
a three-legged stool, as far as really it's a one-legged stool, it's spiritual. He goes, because people could not eat for 21 days. They don't drink. People, it's the spiritual. It's a spiritual tool, a spiritual stool. And what we're getting to the point here is we're leading up to some hope, hopefully, in the second step. And in a way that my sponsor, that Sandy told me, is very helpful to me, is I came to believe that a power greater than myself could help me see the truth about drinking. Because up until this point, we're going to be reading through here and through more about alcoholism, as that people are under the delusion and illusion, and they can't see the truth about their drinking. So I'll continue. It says, when this sort of thinking is fully established in the individual with alcohol tendencies, he has probably placed himself beyond human aid, and unless locked up, he may go permanently insane. These stark, ugly facts have been confirmed by legions of alcoholics throughout history. But for the grace of God, there would have been thousands more convincing demonstrations. So many want to stop, but cannot. Question mark. Do you want to stop, but can't you? Is that your experience? Is that your consideration up until this point in this study? And, it talks about, it says, you got to love how he writes. He says, there is a solution, but then he says, you're not going to like it. It says, there is a solution, and almost none of us like the self-searching, leveling of our pride, confession of our shortcomings, what the process requires for its successful consummation. And I just want to segue for a second here before Adam starts again and say, I'm working with a guy right now with 18 years sobriety, and we read this today, and it hit him. He says, oh my God, Ralph, this applies today in my life more than it does almost when I was new, because now I have 18 years sober, and I don't still, it's harder for me to admit the self-searching, leveling of my pride, confessing of our shortcomings. And that's how we become blocked, by having these things that build up inside of us. So now, no matter how much time you want, this is still the game plan for living. Self-searching, leveling of our pride, confession of our shortcomings, which the process requires for its successful consummation. But we saw that it really worked in others. We had to come to believe in the hopelessness and futility of life we had been living. When therefore we are approached by those to whom the problem had been solved, there was nothing left for us to do but to pick up a simple kit of spiritual tools laid at our feet. We had found much of heaven and had been rocketed into the fourth dimension of existence, of which we'd not even dreamed. So, a lot of considerations there, a lot of questions, but we saw it really worked in others. Where does that happen? It happens in meetings, happens in speaker meetings. Where's that identification that happens where one alcoholic talks to another? Were you approached by people? These are all considerations that happened to me. There was nothing less for us to do but to pick up the spiritual tools. And we're going to get into it a little later on. To be doomed in alcoholic death or live on a spiritual basis. It only really gives us two options. Adam?
Such a powerful paragraph. This really, if you look at the Oxford group had these fundamental ideas: surrender, catharsis, restitution, and service. And if you really look at this, when it uses the word consummation means completion. The implication is there is a completion of steps 4 through 9. Maybe what we should say in AA is rarely have we seen a person fail that's done steps 4 through 9. Rarely have we ever seen anybody do 4 through 9. I do the AA waltz: 1, 2, 3, drink; 1, 2, 3, drink; 1, 2, 3, drink. Right? 1, 2, 3, change sponsors. But this is what I discovered here: is that these fundamental ideas, the leveling of our pride, that's the surrender, right? The confession of shortcomings, the catharsis. Right? The restitution. It's right there. All of that stuff is there. Those three elements are fundamental elements that I see: surrender, catharsis, and restitution. The next piece will be service. But like Ralph had said, have I seen that the solution in other people? Do I see it in meetings? Have I seen that the problem has been solved with them? Am I willing to pick up this spiritual kit of tools? Which are the steps? It's very, very simple. And the fourth dimension, as I've been told, a lot of us argue about what that is, and it really is like the world of the spirit. And some people think it's time, but it is a fourth dimension. If you look at physics, you've got depth, you've got height, right? And you have distance. So fourth dimension in many senses means time here. Ralph, you want to continue?
No, next part. These are great promises. You go ahead. Huh?
The great fact is this and nothing less, that we have had deep and effective spiritual experiences. If you want to, you can go back and look at the spiritual experience. That's going to be something we can either do or we can let you guys do that on your own. But the asterisk is there and it's a footnote, which have revolutionized our whole attitude towards life, our fellows, and God's universe, which are, again, the three things. 1 through 3 is God, 4 through 7 is self, 8 and 9 is others. So it's starting to allude to the three fundamental bodies there. Okay? The central fact in our lives is the absolute certainty that our Creator has entered into our hearts and our lives in a way that is indeed miraculous. He has commenced to accomplish those things for us which we could never do for ourselves. And that was one of the really important things. Is I'm not going to jump ahead too far, but even when I went through the bedevilments on page 52, one of the things my sponsor did is he said, now that you're not drinking, are you still unable to control your emotional nature? Are you still having trouble with personal relationships? Are you still a prey to misery and depression? And was I able to solve or accomplish the ability to overcome those problems without God's help? And that was what brought me to a place where I became teachable. That first piece, the leveling of my pride. Intellectual pride is one of the fundamental things that blocks a newcomer. Like we often say, like Father Martin used to say, the 4 things that block somebody from recovery are wealth, health, youth, and brains. And that last piece, the intellectual pride, it had to be leveled for me. And at this point, when I'm looking at this solution, if you're new, I had to become teachable. I had to see that in and of myself, I could not solve this problem. This obsession was going to continue to take me back to the allergy, and the allergy was going to kill me. So it's starting to talk about the elements now of the solution: surrender, catharsis, restitution, and then later we will talk about service. But those elements are all here, and really the steps are here. 1 through 3, the leveling of our pride, confession of shortcomings, 4 through 7, right? All of it is built in this, just like in the vision for you, where you see the steps again. You will see him really talk about the steps again in that last piece in chapter 11. You see it right here. Ralph?
Okay. If you're a serious alcoholic as we were, question mark, are you a serious alcoholic as we were? And a lot of times up until this point, we're hearing about like really, really chronic alcoholism, and Bill's story, you know, he was maybe what you would call a low bottom drunk. If I'm working with a younger person, there's a lot of younger people on this meeting, I go to page 280 and back one to they stopped in time, and about midway down that page, it's just describes all of them. It's there's no page number on it, but it's on 281, so it really would be on 280. They stopped in time. And it's very important because it says, seeing this danger, they came to AA. It's talking about the 17 stories. They realized that in the end, alcoholism could be as mortal as cancer. Question mark. Do I realize that alcoholism could be as mortal as cancer? Certainly no sane man would wait for malignant growth to become a fatal before seeking help. Therefore, these 17 stories and hundreds of thousands like them have saved lives from infinite suffering. Because a lot of times you might not have that identification going through the book with someone younger. They might not have experienced DT. It's not might have spent its gastric hemorrhages and these other things. They just might be alcoholics, but not yet have experienced that. So it's important to say that if you're a serious alcoholic as we were, we believe there is no middle of the road solution. And to me, a middle of the road solution is nothing that does anything that's not teaching, practicing the 12 steps. We are in a position where life was becoming impossible. Question mark. Is your life becoming impossible? Honestly, that's a consideration that only you can make. And if we pass through the stages, a region from where there is no return from human aid, question mark. But we had but 2 alternatives. One was go on to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of the intolerable situation the best we could. And the other was to accept spiritual help. This we did because we honestly wanted to and were willing to make the effort. And there's all kinds of questions there. Adam?
One of the things I was asked to do on this last paragraph on page 25 is if it says, if we were seriously alcoholic as we were, we believe there's no middle of the road solution. We were in a position where life is becoming impossible. I was asked if that could be drunk or sober, by the way. I could be in this position stone cold sober, that I get to a place where life is absolutely impossible. That what happens is I stop drinking and the outsides get better, but the insides get worse. That I discover that I've got a body that can't process alcohol, but more importantly, somehow I have a mind that cannot process reality. So I got a body that can't drink and a mind that has to. You don't think that's a dilemma? So I can get to this is almost alluding to that second surrender. And it's very interesting because that's something that I really, really had to look at. And then again, the alternatives, live the way I am, which is almost like a thing where we call purgatory, where I'm caught between two worlds. I can't live out there drunk anymore because it's too painful, but I can't be sober and happy because I'm unwilling to let go of some certain ideas. And so that's what it is. Life had become impossible even when I'm not drinking. So I had to see that because a lot of people are living with untreated alcoholism long after they put down the drink. That's why we say surrender or be dragged. And for many years, I was dragged through my life, even in the rooms, because I was unwilling to adopt spiritual principles into my life. So should I start talking about Roland now?
Yeah, and one more thing regarding what you're talking about. What they're talking about is the unmanageabilities. I mean, sometimes I felt that I was regaining control in my personal life. And when things didn't go by my way, I would end up, so miserable in sobriety. That's why for me, when I talk about step one is powerless over alcohol, drunk or sober, and my life is unmanageable. Sober, we become miserable. We become miserable eventually, that picking up a drink is less painful than being sober. Go ahead. Talk about Roland.
Okay. I was just looking at the word locked up on the bottom of page 24 because that really is the treatment center. And we're going to talk about it now. A certain American businessman, this is Roland Hazard, heir to Allied Chemical, a blue blood trust fund baby, had ability, good sense, and high character. For years, he had floundered from one sanitarium to another. Sound familiar? He had consulted the best-known American psychiatrist, who was Carl Jung. Then he had gone to Europe, placing himself in the care of a celebrated physician, the psychiatrist Carl Jung, who was a student of Sigmund Freud, who prescribed for him. Through experience, though experience had made him skeptical, he finished his treatment with unusual confidence. His physical and mental condition were unusually good. Above all, he believed he had acquired such a profound knowledge of the inner workings of his mind and hidden springs that relapse was unthinkable. Sound familiar? I've felt that way before. Nevertheless, he was drunk in a short time. More baffling still, he could give himself no satisfactory explanation for his fall. If you've noticed at the end of meetings, we say, keep coming back, it works if you work it. Have you noticed we don't say, keep coming back, it works if you know it? And what I didn't understand is I'd studied Jung, I'd studied Freud, I'd studied Erickson. I had a really great education. I went through treatment 28 times with some of the best therapists and psychiatrists money could buy. And I couldn't make it past the liquor store. I was exactly like this guy. And I had all the information like many of the people that I've seen die in Alcoholics Anonymous. The knowledge is only good enough to win the confidence of a newcomer where no one else can. Where the clergy couldn't do it, the therapist couldn't do it, the psychiatrist couldn't do it. Another drunk was able to win my confidence because he felt like me. We uniquely identify with each other in a way that somehow no one else can help us but another drunk. It's very weird, but it works like that. So, Ralph?
Okay. So he returned to the doctor, who admired and asked him point blank why he could not recover. He wished above everything else to regain control. Do you want to regain control? He seemed quite rational and well balanced with respect to other problems, yet he had no control whatever over alcohol. Why was this? So all considerations there. He begged the doctor to tell him the whole truth, and he got it. In the doctor's judgment, he was utterly hopeless. Am I hopeless? He could never regain his position in society and would have to be placed up under lock and key or hire a bodyguard if he was expected to live long. That was the great physician's opinion. But this man still lives and is a free man. He does not need a bodyguard, nor is he confined. He can go anywhere on this earth where other free men go without disaster, provided he remains willing to maintain a certain simple attitude. And Sandy used to say to me, Ralph, you have to maintain a certain simple attitude. He said a critical attitude, you end up in critical condition. But what they're talking about here is doing the steps and maintaining that certain simple attitude. And it talks about it, I think, on page 47, Adam, Goes bottom of 47. Let me just see here. It says with this attitude.
Cannot fail.
It says, I think it's on 47. So that's the attitude they're talking about. They get into it. It says some of our alcoholic readers may think they could do it without spiritual help. Let us tell you with the rest of the conversation, our friend with the doctor. And, and I'm working with a guy at this point. Do you think you could do this without spiritual help still? After reading all this about these people in his books and hearing other people's experience in AA. The doctor said, you have the mind of a chronic alcoholic. I have never seen one single case recover wherein the state of the mind existed to the extent that it does in you. Our friend had felt though the gates of hell had closed in on him with the climb. He said to the doctor, is there no exception? Yes, he replied, there is. Exceptions to cases like of yours have been occurring since early times. Here and there, once in a while, alcoholics have had what were called vital spiritual experiences. And that's underlined and highlighted. To me, these occurs are phenomenal. It means they're unexplainable. They appear to be of the nature of huge emotional displacements and rearrangements. And here's the definition. Ideas, emotions, and attitudes, which were once the guiding forces of the lives of these men, are subtly cast on one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. In fact, I've been trying to produce some emotional rearrangement within you. With many individuals, these methods I've employed are successful, but I have never been successful with an alcoholic of your description, ? And here you're seeing that another doctor had another part of the puzzle. We had Dr. Silkworth. He had the problem. He figured out the problem. We had Dr. Young, who knew what it was, but yet he couldn't really figure out what the solution was. So I think it's very important that here in AA, we give our whole program, came to us from non-alcoholics. We had Dr. Silkworth give us what the problem was. We had Dr. Young give us what a solution was. And we had the Oxford group give us the practical program of action. Adam?
Yeah, starting back with notice the word on 26. It talks about the doctor judged me. He was utterly hopeless. Again, am I hopeless? Could never regain my position in society. And then he says he would have to place himself under lock and key. Does that sound familiar? We call it the treatment center. That's what it is. I cannot stay stopped on my own. I went through, and the story many times. I would place myself under lock and key to save myself. And it's almost like Alcoholics Anonymous is the most expensive club in the world. The cover charge for AA, it's almost like being in an amusement park and all the rides are free. But I could never forget what the price of admission was. And that price of admission for me was complete and absolute deflation, that I had to be entirely willing. And when you see it, to hire somebody to chase me around with a stick, right? The new word for the bodyguard is really the sober coach. And I don't want to offend anybody. If anybody's a sober coach on this platform, that's what it is. I look at it, to be placed under lock and key. And what it says after that is, but this man still lives. Here's the solution. He's a free man. He doesn't need a bodyguard, nor is he confined. What a powerful statement. And the part here where it says ideas, attitudes, and emotions that were once the guiding force, I've talked to a lot of people that do workshops, and we talk about that in many ways is the description of the spiritual awakening. It is the description of the psychic change. It is very much in many ways, and it is kind of a physical description, but it is like the conversion experience. Ideas, attitudes, and emotions. And you almost see it when you see our personal adventures before and after in chapter 5, make clear 3 pertinent ideas. A, that I'm an alcoholic and I cannot manage my own life. That's an attitude. B, that probably no human power. That becomes a belief system. I start to see it. Because if I think a human power can do it, I'm going to go to a psychiatrist. I'm going to go to medication. There's a million ways, and I'm going to try to solve that through a belief system. And then it says that God couldn't with his thought, which is starting to lead to what these ideas become. But he really explains right here, one of the descriptions of a spiritual awakening is that. And it said, upon hearing this, our friend was somewhat relieved, for he reflected, after all, he was a good church member. But see, believing's not enough. Faith without works is dead. He says, we hope, however, his hope was destroyed by the doctor telling him that what his religious convictions were, while they were very good, in his case, they did not spell the vital spiritual experience. And that was very powerful. Again, when we say keep coming back, it works if you work it. It's not knowing it. The knowledge of these ideas without the action was insufficient to keep me sober. It is a necessary element. But for me, like a lot of us, it requires more action. It's going to require action. Just understanding this was not enough for me. I knew it 20 years ago, and I couldn't get sober. 25 years ago. There's no loophole here. But that is the definition of a psychic change. Ralph, you want to continue?
Yeah, Matthew, you want to do a seventh tradition quick? We forgot at halfway point, or what do you want to do?
Sure, I'll just be very, very quick. Thanks, Ralph. So this is the time we just sort of hand out the virtual basket, which is really in our chat. So if you can contribute, that's great. We distribute the funds through the various 4 levels of service. And thank you for anything that you can do to help contribute. Back to you guys.
Okay. From the bottom of 27, upon hearing this, our friend was somewhat relieved, for he reflected, after all, he was a good church member. The hope, however, was destroyed by the doctor telling him that while his religious convictions were good, in his case, they did not spell the necessary vital experience, necessary spiritual experience. Again, Dr. Bob could quote the Bible chapter verse, and 3 years before he met Bill, he was praying, but he didn't know the problem or the solution. Here was a terrible dilemma. And our friend found himself with an extraordinary experience, which we already told you, made him a free man. And I love this part of the book. This is highlighted and underwritten. We, in turn, sought the same escape with all the desperation of a drowning man. What seemed at first to be a flimsy reed has proved to be the loving, powerful hand of God. A new life has been given us, or, if you prefer, a design for living that really works. And what I picture is a man drowning in a sea of alcoholism. And, coming into these rooms and we don't really understand what's going on. And, hear people say, believe that we believe. And we hear these steps and we see ourselves in these other alcoholics. And we have to believe that what starts out as that flimsy reed proves to be our higher power. And it gives us a new life. And then in return, we get to help that next man in a drowning in the sea of alcoholism. And it's a beautiful thing. This is the only other book that's really mentioned in the big book. The distinguished American psychiatrist William James, in his book Varieties of the Religious Experience, indicates multitude ways in which men have discovered God. We have no desire to convince anyone that there is only one way by faith can be acquired. If you want what we have learned, if you want what we have learned and felt or seen means anything at all, it means that all of us, whatever our race, creed, or color, are all children of a living creator with whom we may form a relationship upon with simple and understanding terms as soon as we are willing and honest enough to try. Those of us having religious affiliations, we find there is nothing disturbing to their beliefs or ceremonies. There is no friction among us on such matters. And if there's 38 people on this meeting or 79 people on this meeting, there could be 79 different higher powers, and it's all good. Whatever works for you. Alcoholics Anonymous isn't trying to prove the existence of one God, but the absolute need of a God in your life. And he talked about William James, that all these different people that had these religious experience, most of them were desperate. And in the desperation, they found some sort of higher power. I don't know where Adam went. You there, buddy?
I'm here.
Okay.
Before we close this chapter, one of the ways that I have my book highlighted again is prayers, promises, warnings, and directions. The 2 last warnings in this chapter, in the middle of page 26, again, I'm going to say it. It says, above all, he believed he had acquired such a profound knowledge of the inner workings of his mind and hidden springs that relapse was unthinkable. So if you're new and you think that all this information is enough, the next thing he said was, nevertheless, he was drunk in a short time. That is a warning if you're new. And the next piece of the very last paragraph on 27, before we move forward, this hope, he said, however, was destroyed by the doctor telling them that while his religious convictions were very good, in their case, they did not spell the necessary vital experience. So that's another huge warning if you're new to maybe highlight. And then this last piece, there's a saying, God cannot use a man that comes to himself, just comes to the end of himself. And what I didn't really understand here is that I'm only going to go to God. I'm only going to come to this conclusion when I see that self-knowledge is absolutely useless. Then I see that in and of myself, based on self-reliance, I cannot keep myself sober. See, hope doesn't matter to someone like me until I'm hopeless. It just doesn't. And my experience is God doesn't matter to someone like me until my back's against the wall. Only then do I become open-minded. So that part where it says the desperation of a drowning man, it's really interesting because, I mean, I don't mean to be funny, but the bottom really is the same for all of us. And what it is, it's when I ask for help and I'm actually willing to receive it. From Yale to jail, Park Avenue to Park Bench, like with Carl Jung and Roland Hazard, he had everything that life had to offer, right? He had everything. He had every way to justify, minimize, and rationalize that first drink. It was almost like insulation to him. So imagine this if you're new. Imagine throwing a drowning man a life raft, and the drowning man says, I was looking for a blue one, right? Or he says, I really don't like the way you threw it. Think about sponsoring someone like that. How do you sponsor or work with a guy that has that kind of defense? And unfortunately, there's people on Skid Row that are really almost like the day before they die. They will still justify, minimize, and rationalize that first drink. They will still try to defend their right to drink. It's really, really powerful. So we think it no concern of ours what religious bodies our members identify themselves as individuals. This should be entirely a personal affair, with each one deciding for himself in the light of past associations or his present choice. Not all of us join religious groups or bodies, but most of us favor such memberships. So I don't think it matters at all. What the big conclusion for me is I couldn't do this on my own. For me, like a lot of us, if you're new, and we're going to get into this in We Agnostics, I don't believe any of us have to believe in anyone's idea or conception. And that's what Abby had said to Bill in the very beginning. He had said to him, why don't you choose your own conception? And that over a period of time will develop into something that makes sense for you. So I wouldn't let this in any way prevent you from moving forward. Ralph?
In the following chapter, there appears to be an explanation of alcoholism, as we understand it, within a chapter addressed to the agnostic. Many who once were surprising this class are now among our members. Surprisingly enough, we find such convictions no great obstacle to the experience, to the spiritual experience. Further on, there are clear-cut directions are given showing how we recovered. They are followed by 42 personal experiences. Each individual in their own personal stories described in his own language and from his own point of view the way he established his relationship with God. There's given a fair section of our membership and a clear-cut idea of what has actually happened in their lives. We hope that no one will consider these self-revealing accounts in bad taste. Our hope is that many alcoholic men and women desperately in need will see these pages and will believe that it's only by fully disclosing ourselves and our problems that they will become persuaded to say, yes, I am one of them too, and I must have this thing. And it goes on to say at the top of that page, clear-cut directions. And if you remember back on the foreword to the first edition, it says the same thing. It says precisely. So, these are the instructions. No middle-of-the-road solution here. It's not, we follow the directions and we get exactly what the first 100 got. So, Adam, you want to take us out? You want to take some questions?
I'm open to questions. I mean, I can go through and recap the entire thing, or we can do it next week. But, we got about 6 minutes. I'm more than happy to take questions. If any of you guys want to contribute some questions, maybe just to enhance the understanding of other people. A lot of people have questions they don't want to ask, or you know what I mean? So.
I know Bob D. from Vegas, from Detroit, always has something to say.
Yeah, please
Hello,
raise your
everybody.
hand function if you have a question.
Go ahead, Tim.
Hello, everybody. I'm an alcoholic. My name's Timothy. Adam, last week you said something about alcohol being magic, then medicine, and what was the third M?
And the third was misery.
Misery. Okay.
Right. It's
Thank you,
just
sir.
the progression of the disease.
Right, right.
Fun with problems, just problems. But for a lot of us, it's almost like a spiritual experience. And then Bill, as he goes through his story, Bill says, liquor ceased to be a luxury and becomes a necessity. That's where Bill starts to use alcohol medicinally.
Right.
Right. And for a lot of people that have grave and emotional mental disorders, do not, take this personally, but some people never, you'll ask them and they'll say they never enjoyed drinking, but drinking solved the pain. It took the pain away from them. So some people stay in that medicinal place for a long time. And then misery, and then it's like a car with no wheels. We drag it for another decade before we make it to AA. You know what I'm saying? It's like we try every imaginable remedy to control it, enjoy it, and get back what we once found. Like life has its moments, and for those moments we give our lives to recreate and recapture. Like it says in chapter 11, the conviviality, right, that we got from drinking, the companionship, the careless freedom from boredom. That's the magic part.
Thank you, sir.
Well,
I guess Ted.
My name's Ted, and I'm an alcoholic. I'm really grateful that you mentioned page 279 in the book in the stories. Excuse me. One of the parts in there talks about actual or potential alcoholics. And, I haven't been in a treatment center for 28 times like Adam has, and he's mentioned that numerous times. And I haven't had a gastric hemorrhage, which you guys talked about tonight too. So, but and there's a couple other things in my particular story. I've been locked up 10 times though, and there's other things and stuff like that. So there's these little differences that I see, and I'm just glad that you went there tonight, and it really makes some things that I've been struggling with personally a little clearer for me. So thanks a bunch.
Thanks, Ted.
Wendy?
Hi, I'm Wendy, alcoholic. 32 years of sobriety, which I'm very, very grateful for. I thank you. I sponsor a girl who cannot get this thing for love nor money. She keeps relapsing and relapsing and relapsing. And we go over this and we talk about it. We go through the big book. And I've been sponsoring her for 3 years now. And she goes to meetings. She does step work as far as she can without being sober. And I'm just at my wit's end. I mean, I pass this information on to her. I ask her these questions. Yes, I'm willing. But then when it comes to picking up that phone, she just can't do it. Or she can't grasp the higher power. And I'm at my wit's end. I know it's not in my power. I know it's not in my control. But I just feel helpless.
I understand. Ralph, do you want to address that, or should I?
You could.
Well, first of all, in the beginning of the book, it says 50% sobered up at once, 25% with some relapse, and then the other 25% showed improvement. I do believe that there is that small group that shows improvement. But one of the things, when I do that prayers, promises, warnings, and directions, there's 39 specific directions in working with others. And if you read those directions going through there, you're going to see a couple of things. My experience is Bill didn't use the word boundaries in 1939, but a lot of those ideas there, don't work harder at their recovery than they are. And I know when you fall in love with a sponsee and you deeply care about them, how heartbreaking it is. But at the same time, if she was walking the same walk that you were walking, don't you think she'd be doing a lot better? because my sponsees won't meet me at every meeting I'm going to. They won't do the upon awakening prayer and the upon retiring, the review, and they don't do the service and the H&I, but they want the results. It's like going to a gym and looking at a bodybuilder and thinking, I want to be like that, but then sitting in the lobby of the gym talking about working out and never doing the exercises. Could I be wrong?
No.
Okay.
Tracy?
Oh.
Well, my name is Todd Kendall. I'm a grateful recovered alcoholic. This question's towards Adam there. My question is, and I thought about it, and I might have already answered it, but is it possible that the moderate drinker and the heavy or hard drinker can have the same profound, vital, spiritual experience as the real alcoholic as a result of doing this book?
I believe anybody can. I believe that we talk about two things. We talk about what got us here, and we talk about what keeps us here. So the advantages to all that it talks about in that, that preface, anybody that does the work here and engages in the self-reflection, the mindfulness practice of 10, they do the contemplative, the petitionary, and the centering prayers in 11. They do that every day, and they become of service in their community and find other spiritually sick people to work with.
Yeah, when I thought of it, I thought about Eddie's
answer. You already knew the answer. Yeah.
Well, it took me a few minutes to think about it, but I thought about Evie and Bill at the table. I mean, Bill was still drunk with gin in his hand at the kitchen table. Yeah. So basically, he had that spiritual experience while he was still kind of plastered because he heard Evie's message, I think.
But it didn't take effect until a bit later.
Right. Okay.
And that's when I'll just quote something out of the spiritual experience that we didn't mention when that asterisk was on there as a solution. What it says in the spiritual experience is what seldom could have been accomplished by years of self-discipline often occurs in a few short months. The practice of 10, 11, and 12 it's not for a lot of us a white light thing. It's of the educational variety that happens over a period of time, but it is something that applies to all humanity. The thing is, when we're brought to our knees and we're given a life or death choice, then suddenly we have two choices, right? Go on to the bitter end or find a new way to live or live a spiritual basis. The hard drinker or the moderate drinker has an easier time justifying it. Just like in the chapter to wives, the four husbands, and the last husband that's been placed in one institution after another or drinks on his way from the hospital, he's the husband that has the most hope. Think about it. Because he's so impaired that he's so close to all or nothing. I'm sorry if you're new, but AA kind of is an all or nothing deal. If I completely give myself to this way of life, you are going to be rocketed. You will be rocketed. I hope that you stay with us, the people that are on here now, and go through this process with us. And we can guarantee you that you're going to come out of this at least showing improvement, if not having a really, really good life.
Yeah, thank you.
Are we there?
David, couple of questions.
Rodney, I don't care.
I've got nothing to do. I'm open.
David, go ahead.
Okay.
Everybody, my name is David. I'm an alcoholic. Thank you so much, Adam. Thanks for inviting me to this meeting tonight, and it's really great to be here. It's my first time at this workshop. Thank you both and everybody for being here. Real quick, you had mentioned, I have a question direct to Adam. You had mentioned something about the fourth dimension. It was the first time I'd heard it, and you mentioned that it may refer to something in the concept of time. And the only thought that came to me, and I wonder if you could elaborate, would be, does that have to do with the ability to stay in the now in the presence of God's love, where if I'm in the past, I'm in morbid reflection, or I'm in my resentments, and if I'm in the future, then that's where fear is.
Agreed.
And I could never be now. I had to be drunk to be in the now. Does that have anything to do with what you're talking about?
I mean, I've had this conversation with lots of people with time, and we've talked about that question. In physics, right, you got height, you got width, right, and you have depth. Those are the four dimensions in the physical world, like the X and Y axis in mathematics. And then that fourth piece, right, would be time. Like in any kind of equation with physics, time, distance, right, rate. But I do believe that, like we say, for every second or a year we've been sober, we have another second to pause. My experience, if you want to slow down your life, start doing step 11. If you you think your life's going really fast, sit for 5 or 10 minutes. Do the contemplative prayer. Do the petitionary prayer. Do the centering prayer. Those 3 things that lie between page 84 and 88. And what happens is suddenly time stands still. If you've ever played around with meditation, you'll get to a place after a while where all of a sudden you get really comfortable with it. It's excruciating, especially if you got ADD. But if you do it for a while, what happens is all of a sudden you start to enjoy just sitting there, and it becomes a really beautiful thing. And I think that's something that happens. I'm crucified between 2 thieves, yesterday and tomorrow. And yesterday I have guilt, shame, and remorse. And tomorrow I have fear, anxiety, and worry. If you look at the inventories, the resentment is the past, fear is the future. What happens is, as I start to ferret through this stuff, what happens is I start to get spiritually centered. I start to get a quiet mind and a loving heart. And in a place of a quiet mind and a loving heart, our spirits are like a body of water. When they're perfectly still, they best reflect the heavens. You throw a rock into a body of water, you see it ripple, but what does it do? It always restores back to still, right? This is what entering the world of the spirit has meant to me. And that's what the dimension of the 4th dimension is meant. Now, if anybody else has a more, something else to add to that, I'm open to it. Let's call the Dalai Lama if he's around. I'd love to hear what he says. Ralph, do you want to add to that?
No, let's take care of Tracy and Michelle. That was perfect, bro.
Okay, Adam, I've got a question that's really, really important that I get I want to get your opinion on this. I've always understood that when I take people through steps, when they're brand new or slipping in and out over and over and over, you take them through the steps, takes 3.5, 4 months, like usual, like what we're doing now. Recently, I've been listening to, it depends who I'm listening to, different speakers, and they're saying, no, they need really fast. You've got to get them through a lot quicker or you're going to lose them. So later on, you put them in the study, but to begin with, do it in a weekend or do it within 2 weeks. Tell me, I need to know what you have to say about that.
I've done it. I think that, there's a saying in therapy, meet the client where they are. But I think in AA, when somebody's fiercely driven by resentment, they're just driven by it, what I'll do is I'll sit down and show them a rudimentary way to write some quick inventory. I resent, look at the cause, look at esteem, pride, security, ambition, look at the realization, help them to see it from an entirely different angle. I think that the resentment inventory is the greatest anger management tool we've ever seen. I think that it should be in every prison system. I would love to, because I've been able to go into some of the penal colonies and talk about resentment inventory. It's a magical, magical thing for some people, but it really depends on where they're at. If they really want what we have, I wouldn't let a guy suffer for 4 months before taking him through a 4-step if they were driven by resentment or by fear. I want to help them to get as quickly into this and rid of the pain, because like all of us, we've all had 4, 5, 6 passes through the steps, and with every pass through the steps, we've had a new experience with it, right? But this is like triage. You want to try to stop the bleeding with a new guy. If a new guy's sincere and he's willing to chase you around like a dope dealer, take the time. Take the time with him. I'll meet him every day at a meeting I'm going to. I'll meet him an hour before and I'll do it with him. But I'm not going to, I can't, I know that Bill chased Bob. I think that we have to be very careful with codependency here. We don't use that word in 1939, but what that is doing something for someone else that they should be doing for themselves. If they're willing to meet me halfway, I will work with them right away.
Yeah, and
if that makes any sense at all, Ralph?
You could sit with somebody for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and go through control, go through the phenomenon of craving, go through the mental obsession, and go through the spiritual malady, which triggers it, and get them to see that, and to get them to, in step 2, to let them know that door A, you're screwed, you're going to drink again now, or door B, try this. And the greatest thing about what we talk about here night after night is the spirituality stuff, is you don't have to understand it to try it. And 60 to 63, I think, is important to cover all that. But then I don't think that someone's going to get drunk if they do a 4-step, 4-column or 5-column inventory. my experience is they get drunk if they don't do it. And getting that stuff that's right here, that's keeping them up at night on paper through and looking at their mistake is the key. And getting through 6 and 7 and trying to improve, trying to move. And of course, going through the amends process, you can always go through. My sponsor told me you're never going to get the perfect 4-step. There is no special award that says you're going to get this perfect 4-step award. So just get it done as quick as possible, but as thoroughly as possible as you're capable of doing it at that time. So.
I don't know if that got your question, but.
Michelle, you'll be the last question.
Hi, I'm Michelle, and I'm an alcoholic. I'm going to be super quick, so you're going to love me, because I just need a couple things repeated. Surrender, catharsis, restitution, and
service.
Thank you.
The last piece is service.
And you just mentioned 3 prayers, contemplative, and 2 more.
Yeah, in the 11th step, there's 3 kind of ideas, and this is something that comes out of meditation, is centering prayer. Like people stare at a candle, or they just are quiet. But there's other types of meditation. There's contemplative prayer, where I'm contemplating and doing the review. Where was I selfish, dishonest, resentful, and afraid? Do I owe an apology? I'm contemplating that. I'm asking for God's forgiveness. If you look at the word ask, it's used 6 times between 84 and 88. Everywhere you see the word ask, except the one time where it says we ask our spouse or wife or husband to join us, which is really bringing our family into our spiritual life. Every other word ask is a petitionary prayer asking God. So I have contemplative prayer, centering prayer, petitionary prayer, all 3 of those. And what those develop are 4 things: instinct, inspiration, intuition, and insight. The body is instinct. The spirit is inspiration. The mind is intuition. All of it is insight, which we call the third eye. The third eye. Right? This stuff's great. I mean, Bill was awesome. Bill was so close to the realm of the spirit is really, a lot of this stuff, we talk about stepping stones. He really took a lot of these disciplines from Buddhism and from Hinduism and Christianity and Judaism and encapsulated it into some fundamental bullet points here that if you just follow these instructions, you're going to grow spiritually. I promise. That's been my experience. There's always going to be someone it doesn't work for. Hopefully, they'll just throw a dart at us. But you know what I mean? For most of us that have done this, we've been really amazed by it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.